She was 14 years old, taken from her bedroom in the middle of the night, and for months afterward, the world was searching for her, without realizing they were sometimes standing just feet away. Elizabeth Smart's story has been told before, but this time, something is different. In a new documentary, Elizabeth isn't just recounting what happened. She's explaining how a lack of understanding, silence, and deeply rooted beliefs shaped what she thought survival meant. And one detail she shares changes how many people understand trauma, choice, and recovery, not in a shocking way, but in a deeply revealing one. The night everything changed. According to publicly available information, the events began shortly after 1 a.m. on June 5, 2002. Elizabeth Smart, then 14, woke to find a stranger in her bedroom. What followed was a disappearance that would become one of the most widely followed missing person cases in the United States. Authorities, volunteers, and media outlets searched relentlessly. Posters went up, tips flooded in. And yet, for months, Elizabeth remained missing despite being seen in public. That contradiction is one of the most unsettling aspects of this case, and it's something the new Netflix documentary explores carefully and responsibly. But to understand why, the story has to slow down and focus not just on what happened, but what Elizabeth believed at the time. A perspective rarely discussed. In the documentary, Elizabeth explains that before her abduction, her understanding of adulthood, relationships, and bodily autonomy was extremely limited. Not because of neglect, not because of ignorance, but because of silence. She describes herself as a late bloomer, someone whose knowledge came mostly from peers and faith-based teachings, lessons centered heavily on morality, purity, and worth. According to her own words, she believed that once something was taken from you, your value was gone forever. This belief didn't come from one person. It came from cultural messaging, metaphors, and unspoken rules that many people grow up hearing, often without realizing the long-term impact. And that belief would quietly shape how she interpreted everything that followed. Why she did run, a question reframed. One of the most common public questions surrounding this case has always been, why didn't she try to escape when people were nearby? The documentary doesn't ask that question to assign blame. It asks it to provide context. Elizabeth explains that fear wasn't the only factor. Confusion wasn't the only factor. Control wasn't the only factor. There was also a belief, deeply internalized, that what had already happened defined her forever. According to trauma experts cited broadly in similar cases, when someone believes their identity has been permanently altered or ruined, survival can start to look like compliance rather than resistance. This isn't weakness. It's a psychological survival response. And it's one that many survivors say took years to even recognize, let alone undo. The world watching without seeing. During the 9 months Elizabeth was missing, multiple witnesses later reported seeing a young girl matching her description. She was often accompanied. She was quiet. She avoided eye contact. To the outside world, she didn't look like someone who needed help, and that assumption mattered. The documentary includes perspectives from witnesses and law enforcement, highlighting how easily danger can be overlooked when it doesn't match expectations. This wasn't about failure. It was about misunderstanding what fear looks like. And that misunderstanding is something the documentary gently challenges, without accusation, without hindsight judgment. The moment of recovery and what came after. Elizabeth was eventually identified and returned home. The relief was national. But as she explains, recovery didn't begin the moment she was found. It began years later. She speaks openly, but carefully, about how long it took to separate what happened to her from who she was. For a long time, she believed she was permanently broken. That no future relationship could see past what she'd endured. That belief, she says, was harder to escape than any physical restraint. And it's one of the central reasons she chose to participate in this documentary alongside her family. Why this documentary is different. This isn't just Elizabeth's voice. Her father speaks about guilt. Her sister speaks about absence. Investigators speak about missed assumptions. Witnesses speak about what they didn't understand at the time. Together, these perspectives form something larger than a true crime story. They form a case study in how society misunderstands trauma and how well-meaning beliefs can sometimes cause harm. Elizabeth has since become an advocate, author, and founder of an organization focused on prevention and education. Not because she wants to relive the past, but because she wants to change how the future responds. The quiet lesson at the center of it all. One of the most powerful moments in the documentary isn't dramatic. It's reflective. Elizabeth explains that it took years to realize this simple truth. What happened to her did not reduce her worth, and anyone who believes otherwise doesn't deserve a place in her life. That realization didn't come overnight. It came through time, support, and unlearning messages she had absorbed without question. And that's what makes this story resonate far beyond one case. Elizabeth Smart's story isn't just about survival. It's about what we teach, what we assume, and what we fail to explain. It raises a broader question. How many people stay silent, compliant, or invisible, not because they lack courage, but because they believe they no longer deserve help? That question doesn't end here. In the next video, we'll look deeper into how cultural narratives around shame and worth shape survivor behavior, and why changing those narratives may be one of the most effective forms of prevention. If you want to understand the full picture, not the headlines, not the assumptions, that's where the conversation continues.